Okay, recording has begun. Welcome everyone to session number 3 of 6, Solutions by Lise Ritter. I'm going to hand it over now and enjoy the session.
Hi everyone, my name is Lise Ritter, owner of A Passion for Life, and I'm really excited about this particular session because this is where, when I made these changes in my life, my health really turned around. And I've seen the same thing happen with my clients time and time again when they had issues that they never thought they would be able to resolve. And were able to once they addressed their gut issue and started changing how they ate and actually how they thought too, because they work together. But more on that in a second. I'm going to just pull up my presentation and we'll get started. Alrighty. So yes, we've already done the intro. We'll move on from there. My internet is a little slow this morning, it would appear. So we'll be covering how to heal the gut and how that's connected, how the gut is connected to the brain, and it is intrinsically connected. And when we have leaky gut, which is a chronic symptom that everyone seems to have globally, it's not really just something in North America, although North Americans tend to be worse in this area because of the foods that we eat. But we're going to talk about the foods to avoid, the foods that will heal, and a few other topics, all relating to the gut-brain connection. So the vagus nerve is, not as in Las Vegas, but the vagus nerve is the nerve that connects our brain to our gut. And the vagus nerve is the longest nerve of the autonomic central nervous system, divided into 2 parts. You are probably familiar with that. The parasympathetic, which is when we're in that rest, digest, heal, and detoxifying mode, we're at ease and everything is good. And then there's the sympathetic central nervous system, which is when we're stressed or anxious or fearful, or we have a thought that triggers that response. And we are able to trigger that sympathetic response just simply by remembering something that happened in the past that maybe has, creates some anxiety. And even though it happened in the past, our brain is responding and our gut is responding as though it was just happening now. So we go into that fight, flight, or freeze behavior, regardless of if it's something that's past or present. So when that happens, I'm sure you've all experienced when there is some fear or anxiety, your heart might race, you start sweating, your breathing gets heavy, that kind of stuff. That's the kind of thing that happens when we're in that sympathetic state. And the sympathetic nerve controls our heart, our lungs, our liver, kidney, spleen, stomach, colon, and small intestine. So the vagus nerve is a pretty important nerve. Okay. So the connection between the brain and the vagus nerve. There is a signal that goes back and forth between the brain and the gut all day long, brain, gut, brain, gut. And interestingly enough, 80% of that communication is from the body to the brain, from the gut to the brain. And 20% is from the brain to the body. So it's a loop. They're always talking to each other and communicating. And the gut microbiome, which is, the bacteria and the viruses and all kinds of other little creatures that inhabit our gut, is what activates the vagus nerve and communicating with the brain and affecting our behavior. So something as simple as how we think will actually also affect our gut and our health, which is why chronic stress affects our gut, affects our health. So more specifically, when we talk about stress and the vagus nerve and stress and how it affects our digestive system, we're right now a lot of us are in a fearful state about a lot of things, the uncertainty of what's coming in terms of, well, everything really. We all have our own uncertainties in different areas. Anxiety, frustration, poor self-worth, our negative beliefs and thought patterns, fear, concerns about our finances, our relationships, if we're sick, if we're angry, our physical and environmental stressors as well. If we're working too hard, or if we're not, a physical stressor is also eating unhealthy foods, toxic foods. Our environment is very toxic. That's also a stress that people don't often realize is a stressor. So all of those stresses will inhibit the signals that get sent through the vagus nerve, which will cause digestive issues. I don't know if any of you have ever experienced when you're stressed, you have all kinds of gut reactions. And that's because there's a communication going on from the brain through the vagus nerve into the gut. Stomach acids are not working, so we're not digesting food. Fight, flight, or freeze, that's one of the systems that shuts down, because we don't need to be digesting if we're running away from something that is scary. Back in the day when we did actually have things to run away from, wild animals to run away from, the digestive system shuts down because it doesn't need to operate to run or to do whatever it needs to do. The constant chronic stress will eventually cause leaky gut, which is something that we'll talk about shortly. And that will contribute, once we develop leaky gut, it'll contribute to nutrient malabsorption, because we can't be digesting nutrients and absorbing them if our gut is not functioning properly. So when we are in the fight, flight, or freeze mode, no healing or regeneration takes place. And we can only heal when we are in that rest digest state, which is in the parasympathetic state. And these days, anyone I talk to is experiencing some form of stress. And stress in and of itself is normal. We all experience stress, but chronic stress, continual stress will definitely take its toll. So let's talk about this gut microbiome. We have bacteria, fungi, viruses that live inside our bodies and outside of our bodies. A huge portion of it is on the skin, in our mouth, and in our gut. And in our gut, the viruses and bacteria and fungi, if they're healthy, live together very synergistically. And they are in the stomach, small intestine, and colon. And 80% of our immune system is in our digestive system, 70% of which is in the small intestine. So that means we really need to have a healthy gut, healthy digestive system with healthy microbiome to be healthy. There's 10 times more bacteria than cells in our body. So we're made up of more bacteria. So we're basically a little petri dish. And we have in our gut hundreds of millions of neurons that produce serotonin, 95% of serotonin for that matter. And we thought that serotonin, which is kind of that feel-good hormone that we produce, was produced primarily in the brain, but it turns out it's produced in the gut first and foremost. So it's really important to have diversity. We need to have a broad variety, broad spectrum of different microbiome, bacteria, fungi, and viruses to do the different jobs that we require to be healthy, to process certain foods, to attack certain pathogens if we're introduced to those pathogens. And without that diversity, as opposed to quantity, if we have a quantity of viruses that if the ratio is too high, now they start to work against us. But they're there in a lower quantity, in a good balance to do what it needs to do too. So in the microbiome world, as long as everything is in the right ratio, there really isn't a bad virus or a bad bacteria. They all work together. And if it is a pathogenic virus or bacteria that's going to destroy our good cells, then the good bacteria will take care of that. The vagus nerve starts up in the back of in the neck, behind the ear is where it starts, and it goes all the way down through the lungs, the heart, the liver, the spleen, the stomach, the colon, the small intestine. So it's a really important nerve, and that's the communication goes back and forth all day long between our organs and our brain through the vagus nerve, and which is why it's so important. So as I was saying earlier, communication goes back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, but more communication goes from the body to the brain, which I find is kind of interesting. The body being the gut, right? Specifically, everything seems to be connected to the gut. And I was talking about the stressors that we have in life, and we're certainly experiencing a lot of that these days, and how it directly affects our digestive system. And when our digestive system is affected, then it affects everything else, including our brain. So we do need to have a variety of bacteria, fungi, and viruses in good proportion. Variety, diversity is the key, not the quantity. So leaky gut, I'll get into what is leaky gut. Essentially, when we're experiencing that chronic stress or the foods that we shouldn't be eating, toxins, those sorts of things, our body goes, our digestive system and our immune system gets triggered. And when our gut is continually being triggered because of stress or any of those things that I've just mentioned, inflammation takes place in the digestive system. Inflammation starts to damage the wall barrier between our digestive system and the rest of our organs. And now what's happening is it's creating little perforations in the walls of our stomach or small intestine or our colon. And these chunks of undigested food go into, and different pathogens that shouldn't be going into our bloodstream go into our bloodstream. That's going to start to create some big problems, because the foods and those pathogens that were being managed through the digestive system are now going into the bloodstream and can actually go directly into the brain. And that's definitely not what we want. So some of the symptoms that we can start to experience as a result of leaky gut is issues with digestion, chronic inflammation. It can start with gas and bloating. Every time we eat something, we have a reaction to that. It could be headaches. It affects, there's so many different symptoms. These are just a few. It can manifest in skin issues, allergies, asthma, joint and muscle pain, arthritis. Rheumatoid arthritis is very common. It's an autoimmune disease, so is MS. We can experience headaches, migraines, all kinds of cognitive impairments, brain fog, dementia, Alzheimer's. So this is really quite a detrimental condition that can take 6 years to manifest before we start to have symptoms, but it's been working, it's been developing through our system without us knowing it. And then suddenly we have all of these symptoms and we think, what the heck's going on? And very often leaky gut is the culprit. And this, like I said, is something that's going on globally, because we're exposed to antibiotics, medications, toxins that we get through our skincare products, household cleaners, all of those things. Our skin is very porous, and anything that comes into contact on our skin goes into our blood. So we are exposing ourselves to toxins sometimes that we're not even aware of. Of course, stress I've already talked about, and genetically modified foods, I talked about before about the glyphosate, which is in our water, in our air, in the food that we buy, if it's not organic, so it's everywhere. And it directly destroys our gut very quickly. The sugar, MSG, we've talked about before, and other additives and preservatives also directly affect our digestive system. The industrialized farming, the animals, they're loaded with antibiotics and hormones and, like I said, the produce, especially glyphosate. The environmental toxins. I added C-section deliveries and bottle fed versus breastfed because when babies are born, they have a natural, they get their first boost of good bacteria when they're delivered naturally. And if it's a C-section, then that doesn't happen. And if they're breastfed, then babies have more of the mother's immunity as opposed to bottle fed. So depending on, and of course, these things are things that we don't always have control over, but it is a factor when we're looking at over the course of time, how good is our immune system, how good are how good is the diversity in our gut, and when did it start, where did it start? Interesting to note that with antibiotics, only one course of antibiotics, whatever that might be, whatever length of time, can disrupt our microbiome for up to 2 years. It can destroy some of the good bacteria, the whole colony of a certain type of bacteria that will never come back again. So with using antibiotics more and more, especially with my son, for example, had chronic ear infections. Fortunately, he didn't have too many antibiotics, but he still needed them, right? And as we have more and more antibiotics, more and more destruction takes place. So we have to rebuild that and repair that. It doesn't mean antibiotics can be life or death. We need to take them sometimes, but we also need to counteract the damage that antibiotics cause. So this list might be familiar to you because we discussed this before, the foods that we wanted to avoid. And that's exactly why. These foods destroy our gut microbiome. And the genetically modified foods, these are the big ones, the corn, the canola, the soy, potatoes, unfortunately, and sugar beets. They're using sugar beets a lot these days for sweeteners as ingredients. Gluten with the wheat, because it is more gluten than protein. The wheat we used to eat was way healthier. And now the gluten ratio is so high, our digestive systems just can't tolerate it. It damages our gut and damages our brain. Dairy, of course, if it's not coming from cows that are pasture, graze in pastures and are not loaded with antibiotics and probiotics. The milk that we're going to get from those cows is not healthy. They can't clean that out of the milk, I guess is what I'm trying to say. MSG, preservatives, these are all things that we've talked about in previous sessions that I said these were the foods we needed to get out of our diet as much as possible. And this is the reason why. Alcohol and caffeine, well, you know, we all indulge in alcohol and caffeine, some of us more than others, and in and of themselves, they're not harmful in moderation, but they are definitely harmful if we overindulge. So the foods that are going to heal our gut, some of the foods, I did provide handouts that have more of this information. I'm just touching on the big ones. The foods that are very healing to the gut are things like vegetable and bone broth, sorry. They are loaded with minerals. They have collagen in it. Collagen in the bone broth repairs well, we're made of collagen. Everything that keeps us together is kind of like the glue that keeps us together. We need to heal that lining of the digestive system, and bone broth is really good for that. Healthy fats are amazing for the brain. We really need those. I've discussed that before. We need the avocado oil and coconut oil and extra virgin oil, all of those oils. For our brain is 70% fat. And for us to function properly, we need those good fats. Wild blueberries are amazing for our immune system, which we're depleting if we have a leaky gut. Squashes, all kinds of squashes. It's interesting, is really good for the spleen, and the spleen is considered to be the worry organ. So we can have all kinds of squashes and soups. And this time of year, there's all kinds of squashes available. Specifically, aloe vera juice, aloe vera from the plant, when you buy the real stuff, not the stuff that's loaded with sugar, has a healing component where it will heal the inside lining of the whole digestive system, starting from the throat down, basically. And so is L-glutamine. L-glutamine does the same thing. L-glutamine is found in cabbage in very high quantities, and L-glutamine heals that wall that's perforated. Slippery elm bark does the same thing. Probiotics will counteract all of the damage that the antibiotics have caused. And digestive enzymes will help to digest the food that you're eating, because if you have leaky gut, you're not producing the digestive enzymes that you need to break down the food. And if you're not breaking down the food properly, then you're not getting the nutrition that you need from the food that you're eating. So it's kind of a catch-22. And adaptogenic herbs are just herbs that help to revitalize the adrenal systems, because if you have leaky gut, your adrenal system is exhausted, your adrenals are exhausted, and your immune system is exhausted. So this really helps to address those issues, to address the gut issue and the immune system issue and the adrenal exhaustion issue. And L-glutamine can be purchased. A lot of bodybuilders buy L-glutamine to repair their muscles, because if they're working out really hard, the whole idea behind working out hard is the muscles kind of shred and then they rebuild to be bigger. And L-glutamine accelerates that healing process. So if you're drinking glutamine in water in the morning on an empty stomach and at night, that goes a really long way in starting to repair your gut. And it doesn't take as long as we might think. The other foods that are really helpful for leaky gut are fermented foods. And there's a variety of fermented foods. I think it's becoming more and more popular, and people are starting to realize that fermented foods are very good for our gut. And what that does, the biggest thing that it does is it puts more diversity back into our gut. So sauerkraut has certain kinds of good bacteria, kimchi, a different kind. Goat's milk, kefir is, again, different kinds of good microbiome. And goat milk, because it is much closer to what we produce, in the breast milk than cow. Cow's milk is completely different. And goat's milk, people tend to be able to digest. And even if you're lactose intolerant, because it's been fermented, the lactose is gone. So you can actually drink that. It's some people drink it just on its own, but I like to throw it in my smoothies or in my shakes, because I'm just not a milk drinker. I never have, but some people like to drink milk, so that's a good option. And you don't need to drink a lot to get the benefits from it. Half a glass a day goes a long way. And you can make your own fermented vegetables. It's really easy, because you're just chopping up a bunch of vegetables. You want to make sure there's some cabbage in there, throw in some salt, let it ferment, and you've made your own sauerkraut or fermented vegetables. And there's lots of different recipes online these days. And the bacteria is coming from the vegetables themselves and reproducing as it ferments, and it's using the sugars in the vegetables to feed as it ferments more. And it has fermented vegetables basically have kind of a pickled flavor. If you have a little bit of that with all of your meals, that's going to help to digest your food and heal your gut at the same time. So we need to talk about the stressors in our lives, because in addition to healing our gut, we also need to address the stress in our life and how we're thinking and our emotions, because all of those things, every time a stressor or a negative thought is triggered, it's affecting our gut. So we need to learn different ways of dealing with that. And it's not easy these days, that's for sure, because there's so much going on. But there are so many different kinds of apps for meditation and deep breathing exercises. And one thing that I really have come to love is emotional freedom technique, EFT. There's lots online about that, but you're basically tapping on meridians. And if you're having an issue, emotional issue that you're wanting to manage, I guess, you tap on the different meridians while you're stating what you're responding to, reacting to, and it really works on the central nervous system to calm down the central nervous system. So I encourage you to try that. I can certainly provide lots of links to different apps, but there's lots of this online. You can look it up yourself. Of course, sleeping is extremely important. We tend to not be doing a whole lot of that these days. If we're stressed, it's difficult. Again, there's lots of great meditations and apps to help us sleep. One of the big things that people are doing is that they're bringing their phones into their bedrooms to sleep. And unless you have that phone on airplane mode, you are not going to be able to get a good night's sleep, because the radio frequency waves from that phone will disturb your brain and you won't be producing the melatonin that you need to sleep. So if you're going to bring your phone into the bedroom, then at least put it on airplane mode. Things like yoga, stretching, qigong, and tai chi are different ones I've tried online periodically, and they're really cool. And I'm trying to incorporate more of that into my life these days. Walking, gentle exercises, weight-bearing exercises, all of those things are really important for us as well to relieve stress. And I say gentle exercises because if we're already stressed and we exercise too aggressively, then we're actually creating more stress on our bodies. That's more of a physical stress, which we don't want to do. So we have, over the last 20 years, been exposed to all kinds of GMO foods that we didn't know we were being exposed to. It's only since internet and Google has been around now that we know more. We're more educated. We know that we've been eating these genetically modified foods for 20 to 30 years probably. Certainly the corn-based ingredients we've been eating for a long time. So without realizing it, we were damaging our gut microbiome with these foods. And then you add on top of that the overuse of antibiotics, chemicals in the air, the chronic stress. Our gut is going to be affected to varying degrees. But the good news is that we do have the ability to reverse that. And I've worked with lots of clients who have. And in the process of reversing the damage that was caused to the gut, they were able to stop using various prescriptions, and they were able to lose weight, because it's very difficult to lose weight if you're always stressed, and the gut is always stressed if it's in leaky, if you have leaky gut. They were able to reverse lots of health issues. I was able to reverse my the allergies and asthma and a whole bunch of other issues that I had. And Sorry, I'm talking really fast to try to make up for the time that we lost. So we do have options and we do have choices in what we eat, and we do have the control, the ability to heal and repair our gut, which is going to in turn affect how well we can think. It's going to improve the quality of our ability to learn, among other things, and just be less stressed and have a better quality of life overall. So I did provide a lot of handouts that cover a lot more than what I discussed today in more detail, because I just can't cover as much as I'd like to in 30 minutes. And so the first handout is just a quick list of the healthy proteins, high fiber foods, because those are really, really important, the healthy fats, and the probiotic foods and different foods that if we incorporate in our diet, we'll be able to reverse the leaky gut and the damage that we've caused, and improve the quality of our health overall. Because if our gut is healthy, our brain is healthy. If our brain is healthy, our body is healthy. There's some really good recipes for smoothies. More information on leaky gut, more in detail, because as I said, I can only cover a very small amount in 30 minutes, but there's lots of great information there on leaky gut. And then the 4 big foods that I've already discussed, but again, in detail, the big foods that kill the gut and the brain, that affect the brain and destroy our metabolism. And if our metabolism isn't working properly, we don't have energy, we can't build up muscle, we can't be at a good weight. And it all comes down to what we eat is going to determine how healthy our brain is. And how healthy our brain is going to determine how healthy our organs are, how long we live, the quality of our life. I feel like that was a very discombobulated presentation, but anyway, I am happy to answer some questions for you.
Oh my gosh, Lise, no, I was actually waiting to deliver some feedback. My eyes are open wide and my jaw is on the floor. A lot of information. It's incredible the amount of, we have to be very thoughtful about what we put into our bodies and the effects that all these different things have, and the effects that chronic stress have on our digestive system. You articulated that so well, and I was just like, oh my goodness, for myself and other folks in my network, what an eye-opening moment, and something we have to consider and understand. So thank you. That was awesome, I thought.